All right, everyone, buckle up. It's time for Fake News Round 2. This week, you read 2 articles from the Washington Post, one from the New York Times, and one scientific study from the field of human-computer interaction, or HCI, done by researchers at the University of Washington, which, by the way, is one of the best schools to go to if you want to study HCI. I'll recap each article briefly, then talk about the questions. The 3 news articles share stories about individuals making up 1 or 2 specific kinds of fake news. The kind where you literally make something up, and then the kind where you use real photos out of context as evidence for the thing you made up. The first WAPO article talks about one of the most popular perpetrators of fake news. Back in 1769, Founding Father John Adams crafted fake news stories that he used to garner support for the U.S. during the Revolutionary War. The other WAPO article shares an interview with Paul Horner, who created and possibly still creates fake news in the months leading up to the 2016 U.S. presidential election, and he made a pretty penny for his efforts. The Times article talks about yet another author of fake news, fresh college grad Cameron Harris, who also made bank off of his stories. The HCI study looks at the use of hashtags by particular Russian troll accounts leading up to the 2016 presidential election, finding that both left-leaning and right-leaning accounts retweeted the troll accounts, and that the troll accounts specifically worked to foster disagreement among left and right-wing voters. Importantly, the study didn't look deeply at the tweets to analyze whether they propagated specifically fake news. They just looked at how the trolls used hashtags to sow political division. All right, let's go to the questions. Number 1, of the news stories you read for this week, what seems to be the common thread through all of them? Well, there is one main thread throughout all of the pieces and sort of 2 sub-threads. First, people spread fake news for very specific reasons, or let me rephrase that. People write fake news for very specific reasons. People spread it for different reasons. In the HCI article, the goal of the Russian trolls seemed to be to sow political division among U.S. voters. There was a political reason there. Similarly, old John Adams, when he was concocting stories, he was writing them for specific political gain. But Cameron Harris and Paul Horner, they were in it for the money, and it sounds like the money was good. Which leads us to question number 2. What are some of the quandaries faced by people who write fake news? Well, there are a few. First, one of the quandaries now faced by Harris and Horner is whether Google and Facebook actually tamped down on the spread of fake news sites and whether and how that would affect their income. Though Google and Facebook have made noise about cracking down on fake news sites and ad revenue, Horner did make a good point in his interview. Google and Facebook also make good money from those ads, so whether or not they're doing everything they can, well, that's a good question. Another quandary faced by anyone who writes a fake news story is, well, of course, the ethics behind it. Adams' attitude seemed to be that the ends, support for the Revolutionary War, justified the means, making negative stuff up about vulnerable populations. Harris said he was paying for student loans and car payments and stuff, and Horner's attitude seems to be that, well, people are gullible and deserve to get duped. Each of these agents had a different ethical framework that they were working in, but mostly it's either about power or money or both. Keep that idea in mind because it's going to come back with a vengeance next week. I want to add in some commentary here as well because I want to clarify something. Horner's attitude seemed to be very, people are unintelligent and so they deserve to be duped, which is so problematic. First of all, there's the premise that people are unintelligent. As I've already hinted in the assignment introduction video to the podcast assignment, that's just too simplistic an answer to fake news. But also, underneath that assumption is the assumption that if people are unintelligent, then they deserve to be duped. And just think about that for a moment. Does a person's intelligence affect their inherent worth? That's the operating principle Horner is working with, but it's one with which I strongly disagree. And on that happy note, I'll sign off for now. Get ready next week to rethink what you think you know about unfake news. Real news. Yeah, that's what it's called. Real news. Bye!